coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Special start time here, noon Central, 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and sorting through some technical issues here. Jamie Ray Wallace is standing by. She's going to come on from East Palestine, Ohio, or thereabouts. I don't know exactly where she is today. She's in the studio. I can see her, so I think we're okay and we're ready to go today. We got a big week coming up on the show, folks. We're going to start today with Jamie Ray out there in East Palestine. You know, Biden was there Friday. He's been talked about a lot being forgetful lately, but I don't know. This is in the realm of extreme forgetfulness. A year it took him to get out there to East Palestine. He was there Friday. And Jamie Ray Wallace is one of the first and foremost activists out there. We're going to get her reaction. That's today. Wednesday is the Assange Day out in London, where he's being held in Belmarsh. They're going to have, I think, Tuesday and Wednesday of this coming week, the extradition hearings to determine whether or not the United States can get him out of London to bring him over here. And believe it or not, try him for espionage, even though he's not a U.S. citizen in our U.S. judicial system, for something that he published. And we're going to get into all of that on Wednesday with Matthew Ho, the great Matthew Ho, is co-hosting a forum that was created by Kelly Lane, Candidates for Assange, to try to get some of these candidates on board with this effort, because this has huge implications, not only for moi and those that like their First Amendment rights, but Fourth Amendment rights also. There's a lot in play here. That's going to be Wednesday on the show. That'll be at 10 o'clock Central Time, our normal start time, so don't miss that. And then on Friday, we're going to have the great William J. Astori back on Podcast by George. He's been killing it with his Substack. Matter of fact, I'm going to bring one of his most recent up here on screen to kind of get us started here. Bill Astori. That isn't, let me take that away. Doggone it. I didn't mean to bring that up on screen. We'll get to that a little bit later. That's the letter from the folks out in East Palestine to President Biden. Here we go. This is what I wanted to bring up on stage. This is William J. Astori's Substack, and he writes that whatever you do, don't believe your lying eyes. You know, you've heard me talk about this on the show before, and this guy is great. You got to subscribe to Bracing Views on Substack so you can read this. He says what I'm thinking, and I think probably, hopefully, what you're thinking as well. He says a few reflections on Biden, Trump, and Gaza. This is going to get us started today. This is what Astori says. When I watch President Biden's news conferences, I see a man in his early 80s who has occasional memory lapses, who sometimes slurs his words, who increasingly looks frustrated and confused. In short, I see a man visibly in decline, a man who shouldn't, in my view, be running for president for another 4-year term. And then I read reports in the media that tell me that Biden's in complete command, a master of detail, high-energy president who's fully in charge. Rides his bicycle, right? How can my eyes so deceive me? Bill writes that when I watch former President Trump, notably at his rallies, I see a man in his late 70s who occasionally mixes up names and details, who lashes out at his enemies, real and perceived, who always boasts of himself and his greatness, and whose preferred form of humor is to mock and belittle others. In short, I see an extreme egoist and narcissist, the very opposite of a public servant. And then I read accounts by his supporters, and maybe some of the most extreme right-wing media out there, that Trump's the best hope for restoring American greatness, that he's a populist, oh my God, who cares deeply about regular folks. The two wouldn't recognize one another. I keep telling people about that all the time. You support Donald Trump? My God, that man wouldn't even look at you when he went down the road in his limo. How can my eyes so deceive me, Bill says. All right, so here's the final paragraph. When I read and watch accounts of Israel's war on Gaza, I see a war of annihilation against the roughly 2.3 million Palestinians who live there. Indiscriminate bombing and shelling, the widespread destruction of critical infrastructure, the beginning of mass hunger that very well may end in mass starvation and death. and I see a genocide in progress, a massacre, another Nakba or catastrophe for the Palestinians there. And then I read and listen to the Israeli government's account of its war on Hamas, an account largely supported by the U.S. government. And I'm told I'm witnessing a necessary battle to kill terrorists that upholds the rules-based international order. Again, he says, how can my eyes so deceive me? Readers, are your eyes also deceiving you? Do you, like me, writes Bill, have lion eyes? Then again, perhaps our eyes are just fine, and the lies and deceit are coming from elsewhere. Lion eyes. That was the Eagles song, I think. Okay, so that's how I wanted to start. That's a good intro to today's show, and also as a means of promoting what's coming up Friday with William Astori. That's just one of his recent postings on Bracing Views. He's great. But here's what we're going to be talking about today, folks. And it is with the great Jamie Ray Wallace. President Biden visits East Palestine, drinks the water. Maybe you saw that. I mean, God, that was what a horrible photo op that was, if that's what this thing was. You remember on the extreme left, how Obama has been nothing but chastised for faking that drink of water in Flint, Michigan. And then Biden goes out there and drinks this water. I don't know. The media picks up on it. Maybe it wasn't what they wanted for a photo op, but that's kind of what it became. And here's our guest, Jamie Ray Wallace. She's the wife and mother. She was in her home in East Palestine, Ohio, when one of the worst man-made disasters in American history descended upon her community and her family. Now, she's becoming an activist. She's taken it personally, and it is personal for her and lots of folks there. Jamie is the president at Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment. So let me take that off the screen, move a couple of things around here, work the magnificent technology that we have available. Click that button, click this one, and say good afternoon to Jamie Ray Wallace. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. You look great out there. We had a little technical issue coming into the show, but I appreciate your patience and standing by for that introduction, that article by William J. Astori on Bracing Views. But I wanted to get with you because I read some press accounts, not a lot. I heard about Biden coming to East Palestine. What I saw was kind of a cursory treatment of it. I've seen some postings by Scott Smith, the scientist, on your website that are very critical. I'm going to get to those, but I want to start because you've been so patient here to wait for us. What was your overall reaction to this? And most importantly, did Biden meet with you, and did he meet with your group and your folks while he was there?
No, he did not meet with us. I had visited the CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality, at the White House just the day before he announced that he was coming. We asked to be put on the list. We continually get blocked from talking to our politicians by our local village government. They pick the same cherry-picked people that preach about economic recovery over human health issues. So no, even though I've been to the White House twice, speaking to senior level advisors, I spent a day on Capitol Hill where I met with 12 different senators from across the country. Unity Council has worked with scientists. We have taken people to the assistance center. We have, members that have been in the creek since day one. But yet our town cannot focus on economic recovery and human health issues at the same time, because who would come into town to buy stuff if they still knew we were sick?
Good question. I'm still getting a little bit of internet freeze on your connection here. I don't know if you're seated next or near your router, or maybe all of these gymnastics to finally get yourself on. Maybe you need to log off and come back into that link if you know how to do it now in your
sorry.
You can do it. Yeah.
Let me try this.
It looks okay right now. Yeah. It comes and goes. Let me read this thing by Scott Smith, because I'm okay. Jamie, tell us who Scott Smith is, first of all.
Scott Smith is one of the only independent scientists that have been helping us. He's been at over 60 disasters in the United States. It started with his own issue with a business he had getting flooded with contaminated water. And he found that when the EPA was testing it, they were just taking the water from the top of the creek or of the flooding. They weren't going through the whole water table to see what was in it. He has a couple of patents We contacted him early on, and he came in to test the creeks. He saw how bad it was, so he started testing our furnace filters. It's the closest thing to our lungs, to what we breathed in during this derailment. This is all self-funded out of his pocket. And without him and a lot of other people, support from other nonprofits, other scientists, we would have been left here to die.
Hi, well, that's a great introduction. Let me get to what he says here. Now, he's reacting to Biden's visit on Friday. This is what he has to say. And people have heard me bitch about the mainstream media on the show all the time. This is about the USA Today. Now, I'm going to get to their article and some coverage on this, but this is what this guy says. And Jamie likes him. And a friend of Jamie's is a friend of mine. But here's what he says. We may have our state-run Media Journalist of the Year award going to Michael Collins of the USA Today after Joe Biden's visit to East Palestine yesterday. For those of you outside East Palestine, Ohio, that still believe we live in a democracy, quote unquote, with protected free speech and constitutional rights and government agencies that are here to protect your health and well-being, you need to think again and pay attention, because, and the highlighting here is mine, and this is, God, this goes to Assange and everything that I was talking about earlier. This could be you and your community next.
Right.
And Jamie and I have talked about this. If you lived in proximity to a rail line, and we all do, we all live in proximity to rail lines, this could be you next, and this could be the coverage that you'll see and the visit from the president a year afterward that happened in East Palestine. He says, I've been to East Palestine 23 times, 27 rounds of testing over the last year, and I can tell you firsthand that things are not okay. So if you're seeing coverage like this from mainstream media after Biden's visit, it ain't so, says Scott Smith. Victims are being silenced by Norfolk Southern's undue influence, along with Norfolk Southern's PR firm, otherwise known as the EPA. Yeah. Now with Joe Biden's visit yesterday, we have proof of state-run media that is complicit in spreading misinformation, disinformation, and aiding and abetting the cover-up of East Palestine. Now, this is the article written by Michael Collins, an excerpt from USA Today, stating as follows. Dateline Washington. He drank the water. President Joe Biden saw firsthand on Friday the cleanup efforts in East Palestine, Ohio, more than a year after Norfolk Southern's train derailment released hazardous chemicals into the soil, water, and air. Okay, and we're going to get to some of this wording and some of these other things. Every word means something, but a lot of this writing, Jamie, it always talks about how the derailment caused all the problems, how these chemicals spilled, and that's the issue. But as you're the first one to point out, a lot of the long-term potential could come from the way that it was handled. They put it in a damn pit and set it on fire, for God's sake. And then they haven't done a hell of a lot to prevent this from spreading through the air, ground, and soil to other homes. And that's what your primary contention is. Now, the quote from the article says that Biden praised what he called the Herculean cleanup and announced grants from the National Institutes of Health to study the short and long-term effects of the containment released by the derailment. Okay, that word means something, Herculean, and people that, remember their ancient mythology, maybe Hercules was he was a pretty stout dude. He killed a lion and wore the lion's skin and all that kind of stuff. That's who Hercules was. But Jamie, are you seeing anything Herculean out there?
Absolutely not. I think most of the contamination now is not from the derailment, but from their failure to clean it up properly and to clean it up right away. Before you could see this chemical sheen just floating on our creeks, they still don't have a plan to clean our creeks yet, over a year later. So now you don't see that sheen. And if you tested that water on the top, it might be fine. I don't know. But I know when you step into the sediment or you take a shovel and put it into the sediment, that a chemical volcano comes out. The last press conference, you talk about words that the EPA had. They said that our creeks, the contamination in them are likely legacy chemicals. You don't tell a bunch of country people that. We've played in those creeks. We fished in those creeks. We've walked those creeks. That was never there before. About maybe 3 weeks ago or so, just by chance at a meeting, Mark Durno from the US EPA admitted that they found chemicals in the creek that could not be traced back to any industry in the area. So he said it was a combination of legacy chemicals and chemicals from the train. And I said, well, why didn't you announce that publicly? Well, what do you mean? Well, the last press conference, if you think that it's important enough to say that these chemicals are likely legacy chemicals, why don't you see it as important to say what they actually are once you found out what they are? They've just allowed this stuff to sit. Norfolk Southern, immediately after the derailment, told the firefighters that they were dealing with malt liquor, treat it like a house fire. Our firefighters unknowingly were putting hundreds of thousands of gallons of water onto these tankers, flushing those chemicals right into the stream that was at ground zero. They did not contain the contamination that was running into our creeks soon enough. The notorious illegal open burn. We have the US EPA admitting that. Once they did that burn, Norfolk Southern, which absolutely did not need to be done, if you watch NTSB hearings, the owner of the vinyl chloride oxyvinyl had actually said there was no risk of it polymerizing, and the temperature on that one tanker had actually dropped and was kind of plateauing out. That information from oxyvinyl went to Norfolk Southern, but it never went from Norfolk Southern to the people making the decisions. You want to talk about criminal? So they blew this vinyl chloride, 5 tankers full up over us, now lab rats. And then they just covered everything up, built their tracks, and rolled out in 2 days. When we went home, I went back and looked at videos. I'm asking the guy, like, what all chemicals are in our creek? Like, we haven't even seen a manifest yet. Do you want to test the soil? Well, we don't feel need to test the soil, even though we've recently proved that they knew on February, I think it was 9th of last year, right after the derailment, that we had elevated levels of dioxin in our community. So this wasn't, even if, let's just say you think it was an accident that it derailed, we won't even get into precision scheduling and, the construction of the tanks and the lack of railway safety. It was no accident that they covered this up and moved on and left us there. Had it not been for people that raised their voices, that knew it wasn't right, didn't need the EPA or science to tell them it wasn't healthy to be there, they would have just left us for dead and left all that contamination there.
Here's one thing that I don't understand. You probably know a lot about, but yeah, I'm an old truck driver. I grew up in a truck driving family. Well, if you were a driver on a tanker, for instance, you were hauling hazardous fuel, something like that. There was a handbook. I mean, you were instructed. You knew what to do if there was a spill. Hell, if you go to the gas station and the pump overruns, they have directions on what to do in the event of a spill. What about the railroads? I mean, they're hauling these hazardous chemicals, this vinyl chloride that you're talking about. Did they have any classes or instruction, or did they let anybody along the rail line know what to do if they have a spill in a populated area? Was that known?
It wasn't even marked as a hazardous container. I guess there is some kind of app that firefighters can use if you know what you're dealing with. They didn't even know that it was vinyl chloride. They didn't know what other chemicals were in there, because what we also didn't know is when a train derails, proper procedure is to disconnect the engine and move it a mile away. So while Norfolk Southern had the manifest to their cleanup crew within hours, actually, I think it was like 14 minutes if I remember, but it was no more than like a half an hour at the NTSB hearings. It took over 4 hours to get that manifest to our drivers or to our first responders. Who knows that the conductor's a mile up the road with the manifest. So, yeah, there are things out there. If you have access to them, if you have knowledge that they exist. Part of the issues is with a lot of these small fire departments, they're volunteer fire departments.
Right.
So the funding and all those types of things. And when I think about how much we've learned that we could use as a community to prevent other disasters, let's even look at trauma care. I mean, if that train would have exploded and that shrapnel would have went a mile around, our closest hospital is what, half an hour away at least. Our closest trauma care is probably about 40 minutes away, and there's no way it would have had the capacity to deal with what we would have been dealing with had that tanker exploded.
Bring up the rest of the article here because there's some things I want to get to, and then there's a little bit more from the USA Today that we are criticizing, but I also have a kind of a different perspective on it. We'll get to that. So, exactly what residents impacted by the Norfolk Southern Trail Run did Joe Biden meet with? Were voices silenced? Were people hijacked by the White House EPA while others were silenced? If so, how did this happen and why in a democracy? Now, you know, I'm here in Iowa, Jamie. I recognize and know because I follow media and look at it. You've been in everything, I think, from the New York Times on down. You are one of the main spokespeople in East Palestine, Ohio. Why didn't they meet with you? Who did they talk to, or did they talk to anybody? Did they just do a photo op? What was this?
I mean, they did talk to residents. They talked to the cherry pick business owners that are handpicked by the mayor for every meeting that sit there and say, everything's fine, everything's fine. They met with a couple of other residents that kind of advocate for the community. One of them didn't live in our community. The other two had not been on the ground, but I'll tell you what they had that I didn't. They had the ability to be politically correct and maybe controlled. I'm too much of a wild card for them to meet with me because I'm not going to BS anyone. I don't care if you're the president of the United States or you're an unemployed drug addict. I'm going to talk to you the same way, and I'm going to tell you what the issues are. I'm not going to care if you're Democrat or Republican or if it's going to offend you. Yay, you gave us a health center, but you know what? It doesn't employ a toxicologist. We had primary care physicians. Why waste your money? First of all, partnering with probably the hospital that has the worst reputation in our area. Like, you have to talk to the community to know what our needs are and what we need done. You partner with this hospital that nobody trusts anyways. You don't employ a toxicologist. So kind of what is the point of it? And I also feel like it was kind of a slap in the face. Like, okay, George, you drink this glass of poison every day, but I'm going to give you a doctor to go to. But other residents are, politically correct. Oh, thank you. You've done so much. That's not me. It's never been me. It'll never be me.
Let me get through this now because we're going to get to the crux of it here very shortly. This is the silencing of this, and that is from Scott Smith, as I mentioned earlier, and he is that independent scientist that's, through his own volition, basically has done this testing and all that, and he was outraged by what happened with this presidential visit. You got to remember, too, also, that they waited a year for this, folks, and here's the USA Today coverage.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Yeah, please, Jamie. Yeah.
Not only did President Biden wait a year, but, his son died from exposure to chemical burn pits when he was in the military. The same doctor that found that connection between those burn pits and our veterans' illnesses are now studying East Palestine residents. The true matter is nobody knows what to do with multiple chemical exposure. The science isn't out there. When they test for these different chemicals, they only expose the subject to one single chemical. But what happens? Okay, EPA. Well, the science says, well, guess what? Our bodies are telling you something different. When the research isn't there, I'd much rather you say, you know what? We don't know what this stuff is going to do to you, but we're going to take care of you and monitor you and get you out of these chemicals that we know bioaccumulate in your system.
All right. So, yeah. I wanted to get to this because of what Jamie said earlier. Biden has faced relentless. Now, this is from the USA Today. This is from that article that was cited by Scott Smith. USA Today writing here says Biden has faced relentless criticism from Republicans. It's highlighting his mind. I looked at that. What the hell? What are you doing here? Again, every word means something. If you're the USA Today, why would you frame this in terms of politics? You heard Jamie say earlier, this is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. There has been all kinds of criticism from Democrats in East Palestine, independents in East Palestine, and people that don't vote, don't identify themselves as any political party or following. why put it in the context of this? I don't get that. For not visiting East Palestine for the past year. That's what this criticism was. They've accused him of ignoring a blue-collar town that former President Donald Trump carried by 40 percentage point in the 2020 election. Okay, well, that's what the right-wing extreme ecosphere says. Maybe that's their main bitch, is they're putting it in this context, but that's not what Jamie is talking about here. And I got to believe, Jamie, this is not what the majority of East Palestine residents are concerned with. Trump versus Biden on this issue. I don't get this.
It was frustrating yesterday or Friday when Biden came into town. They also did a Trump rally there. And that's what I told the local Republicans is you're taking away from the true issue. You're going against everything I've been saying and fighting for is this should not be a political issue. Politics have no business when it comes to issues of human health. We look at this railway safety bill. Like you said at the beginning, this could happen to anyone. Do you think that train said, oh, let's see if these are Republicans or Democrats before we crash here? Even if the train did make that decision, do our kids deserve to die because of the way we voted? They're on Capitol Hill playing politics with your children's lives. This should not be a political issue. This should be an issue that is based on human health. Like, where is our humanity? Why? We've had bipartisan letters written from our own senators that have been completely ignored. So that right there tells you how deep these politics go. That's bipartisan.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how deep politics goes. I don't think they understand how it is destroying the world that we live in, from Gaza, from Palestine in the Middle East to East Palestine, Ohio, from the environment to space wars, for God's sake, with a budget to blow up planets. That's what we're talking about here. I want to get some guest comments in here because folks have been kind enough to watch and are weighing in with their opinions. This is from the great Suzanne Murphy with the Truth Bomb Activist. That's gross to politicize the issue, like that article that we're talking about. Now, this is from Mary Knox, and she rides a shotgun on my show a lot, Jamie. And she says, having some chemistry background, yes, most chemicals, no matter where they're used, are supposed to be accompanied by MSDS, material safety data sheets that would give information on spills and health hazard. It is required by law for those to be available easily in the case of a spill. Yeah, you can't be looking it up or Googling it or maybe waiting to go to a public library or something. That stuff has got to be right there, folks. This is from somebody near and dear to podcast by George. Lori McManus-Solo. She says, your speaker is like an Aaron Brockovich. So glad she continues to speak out along with Scott Smith. Hang in there, Jamie. And Aaron Brockovich is still active out there in East Palestine, isn't she, Jamie? What's her role? What's she doing?
She has not been into town. When she first came here to visit, she got really sick. That's an old eye injury from her chemical exposure. But, I've heard that about the Aaron Brockovich thing. And I would tell you this. I'm just a house mother that would not let my kid go into a contaminated house. I didn't care what the scientists were saying. And this goes to your point, George, where I think that I failed to open my eyes before. I argued kind of with my husband before we went back after the evacuation because he said, what are we going to do? When they lift the evacuation, I said, we're going to go home. Like, if the EPA says it's fine, it's fine. If I would have heard somebody saying some of the things that I'm saying right now, or that if I would have known that the government went deep enough to not care about human lives, I would have thought this was like a conspiracy theorist, one of those people that want to out west get a shotgun. But this stuff is true. This does not work how you learn it works in school. And I knew that as soon as I pulled in the driveway and you're just overtaken by this chemical smell. My lungs are burning. I'm coughing. Lips are burning. Eyes are watering. I look over and I see chemicals free flowing down my stream. I don't need to be a scientist to know my body's telling me that it's not okay. And right then is when I started to lose trust in our government. If you look at the things, each little bit individual thing from East Palestine is terrible. But when you look at the totality of it, it's almost unimaginable that this is going on and that we live in the United States of America. I fail to believe if other communities knew that we still have children coughing up blood with unexplained nosebleeds, with neurological issues, seizures, that people wouldn't be saying anything, that they could just leave us here to die. I don't care if you're a politician, if you're a journalist, if you're just someone from a community across the United States. I don't see anybody saying, "Oh, that's okay. Leave them there to die," because you know what? Norfolk Southern's responsible.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and it's the funnel effect that I talk about on Podcast by George all the time. Dying will ruin your day. I'm a life and death guy. I mean, that's where you start. As an example, Gaza, for God's sake, out there, 30,000 Palestinians. And I mean, they've been slaughtered. They're dead, 10,000 children. And a lot of conversations, you get people together in this country. What do they want to talk about? They want to talk about Trump. I'm like, are you shitting me? I mean, really? Is that what we're
right.
focusing on? I mean, come on. So here we go. Friday, Biden received a briefing from local officials on the cleanup efforts and said the derailment could have been avoided. Okay, so I'm getting into this and I'm thinking, oh, all right, now what did Biden say exactly? Quote, while there are acts of God, says Biden, this was an act of greed. Oh, that's good. That was 100% preventable. Yeah, that's good. He said, let me say it again. An act of greed that was 100% preventable. Okay, that's great, Jamie, but we're talking about prevention. This is something that's already occurred. And so what are we going to do about it? What's going to happen next? But I wanted to ask you about this because the highlighting here is mine. This is the president of the United States on the record saying that this was an act of greed that was 100% preventable. Now, is that good for you and yours? Can you use that in your efforts to get something done? And maybe most importantly, now I'm not a legal scholar, but might this have some benefit legally for people that want to pursue some kind of legal action against the railroad?
Honestly, I don't care at this point. What
Yeah.
I'm most focused on is getting people out of here and getting help. Like you said, I know that the bigger issue here is the whole petrochem industry. They're talking about banning vinyl chloride, and I will support that as long as people support East Palestine. Right now, we need to get the impacted residents out of those homes that are still contaminated. Then we can talk about lawsuits, years in the making. Then we can talk about, banning these chemicals, getting to the root of the issue. But right now, we need to look at the present. We need to look at the people that are suffering presently, and we need to get them the help that they need. We've waited long enough. I mean, come on, how long are we supposed to wait here before our government sends us help? Obviously, they talk about holding Norfolk Southern accountable, but then hold them accountable. They have not been accountable to the residents. They've been accountable to our village officials that got a $25 million park. They just hired a marketing department, PR department, $750,000 for a 10-year contract to recruit kids to a school that hasn't been properly tested. They've thrown festivals, they've thrown Easter egg hunts, our fireworks, 4Ks, street fairs. They gave one of the fire department guys' daughter a job as the Norfolk Southern event planner. They have just the stuff that they have done in the community. I mean, they gave $1 million to the village government and then make them ask like their daddy if they can spend the money and tell them what they're going to spend it on. Like, we live in the village of Norfolk Southern. One of our business owners was just quoted as saying, "This is the best thing that ever happened to East Palestine. Our economy is going to be booming."
Oh my God.
But
Well,
what if our kids are dead?
yeah, here's the other thing, and you've pointed this out on the show before, but yeah, that term that was so popular not too long ago, paradigm. Change your paradigm, change your way of thinking. U.S. government that spends trillions and throws away trillions in places like Afghanistan and causes more harm than good, in Iraq and, my God, Ukraine, and now with the situation in Israel and Palestine. Use that money, use some money, and make the people in East Palestine, Ohio, healthy. Make them do the best that you can. Prevention's great, but this can't be prevented. Do something now with this money, the government, and then government, go get your money from Norfolk Southern, like it looks to me like they're trying to get money from Donald Trump. I mean, they're fleecing that dude, and well deserved. Now, a lot of that's civil action and through the civil courts and that type of thing, but there are federal actions against him. But the government could take the initiative. They've got money. They should be helping you folks, and then bring Norfolk Southern kicking and screaming with their pocketbook at a later date. That's how you change the paradigm. Let me bring this up on screen here one more time. We'll take this out with this article anyway. This is, again, from the USA Today. I got to get it up big enough where I can read it. Biden stressed that the federal government is holding Norfolk Southern accountable. Well, what does that mean, Jamie? He called on Congress to pass legislation sponsored by Ohio's 2 U.S. senators that would require stronger protective measures for trains carrying hazard material. But that is not what you wanted to hear. And if you'd have been allowed to speak, if you'd had his ear, you'd have been asking questions about other issues other than trying to prevent something like this from happening again. Mm-hmm. That sounds a lot like PR to me.
He came here to talk at us, not to talk to us. That was apparent just from his press release. He came here to tell us what all they're doing, not to ask us what we need. Same thing when he did that presidential order that he sent out, and that he said that they were appointing someone from FEMA that was supposed to come into the community and assess our needs. Mr. McPherson wouldn't talk to residents. He flat out said he did not want to talk to residents. It's, I say through this, I've learned so much. And one of the things I learned, this is not government by the people for the people anymore. By the time what's going on the ground gets to that federal level, it's all politics. It's not happening. It's not what's happening, with us on the ground anymore. And that's disgusting. It's not anybody asking us what our needs are as a community, or even things that you don't really think about, like how do you communicate with your community? We have a large population of elderly people in our community because we are kind of backwoods. We're kind of behind technology wise anyways. So they're giving you QR codes. I'm going around trying to get people to look at, and they're like, have their flip phones. Like, what do I do with this? And it's like, those are the things that you need to be asking. When this first happened, we had a lot of nonprofits very graciously sending us gas masks. No one was wearing a gas mask. What we really needed was air purifiers. We needed air filters. So having people in the community to guide some of that, even for mutual aid, is what I found to be really helpful.
Well, let me go to this now, because some people will look at this and want to criticize any activist in any situation. Like, they'll say, well, they're not making their concerns known. They're not doing it the proper way. They're not going through proper channels. I mean, the government would do more if they clearly understood what it was that these people want. Oh, yeah? Well, they do. And here's why. Jamie and the gang out there in East Palestine has written a letter. I'm going to bring this up on screen. I'm going to read this. I mean, in no uncertain terms, President Joe Biden, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, regarding a recommendation for East Palestine and nearby communities. Dear President Biden and EPA Administrator Reagan, it says, as you prepare to visit East Palestine this week. Now, this was just written a few days before the visit. So they had this. We would like to offer recommendations on steps that your administration can and must take, highlighting his mind. They got to take these steps. And again, to go back to what I said earlier, I'm not going to repeat myself, but they can do this. Biden can do these things with executive action. These are not things that require congressional approval, don't take years to get done. These things need to be done immediately to continue to provide critical assistance to the people of East Palestine and nearby communities. Okay. Number one, Jamie, provide immediate and long-term health care. This is a health issue, first and foremost. Talk about this.
To include a toxicologist. That was what I asked them to add if you got the most updated version, because, part of the issue here is that we don't have access to toxicologists. And even if you drive to Cleveland or Pittsburgh, insurance won't cover it. It won't cover the chemical testing. When I took my daughter to the doctors and I said, is there anything my daughter's for? Is there anything that we can start testing her for now that'll benefit her, her health long term? Like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I don't know. Maybe you can start looking at liver enzymes and over the years see something building up. And The doctor says flat out, I don't know. I don't know about chemicals. My mom's doctor, my mom has been so sick since she's been back in her home in November. A woman who never sits down, could barely get up. She goes on vacation and feels fine. When she returned to her home back in February, when they lifted the evacuation, she felt the same way. And, she went to the doctors recently. All of her blood work came back good. And he said, look, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you back in February. You need to get out of East Palestine. But how do people do that? Could you just take off and replace everything in your home, all your belongings, your furniture, your rugs, all the stuff that has been contaminated by this smoke and these chemicals? So yes, we not only need the healthcare, but we need it to cover a toxicologist.
And they can do it. They can afford it. I mean, you hear this, you think, oh my God, that would take a lot. You just have no idea. The subsidies that we give these major corporations, these industries, big ag, where I'm at, as an example, or the 800 military bases that ring the globe. We're talking about trillions of dollars. What Jamie is asking for here is completely plausible. It's completely in the realm of possibility. They can do this. Let's continue here with, and again, we've got a list. Number 2 on the list here, set up a long-term medical monitoring program, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, they should have, Biden did announce some grants, but one of the things that I learned through this is there is no emergency response for human health. A lot of these scientists had to wait this long in order to get their grants approved. They should have been studying us from day one. Like I said, there's no research on these multiple chemical exposures. And if my daughter is 14 years old and has to watch me deal with cancer, or God forbid, I have to watch her go through cancer, at least I feel like I would have some kind of peace knowing that they did those studies the right way and they potentially saved someone's child that's watching right now. So that's very important to us, is that you turn us all into guinea pigs. So study us. If I have to be a guinea pig, study me. Just don't sit there and watch me. So, creating these records so that we can see things like, liver cancer from these multiple chemicals, things of that nature. At this point, one of my concerns is a lot of the most impacted residents have already left the area. So how do you show a cancer cluster if we're spread out across the United States now?
Good point. And again, it's so much of this is about kids. If you're clear thinking, if you're forward thinking, the future generations. I mean, the people that we provide this lip service, we'll do anything for kids. Well, how about doing this for kids, folks? Number 3, provide all financial resources for relocation. This isn't something the government even, are they considering relocation? I mean, is that, yeah, tell us about this.
So right now, our real estate in East Palestine is selling for above market value. I started researching it, but there's so many things to do. Like you said, it's not just water contamination or soil, it's everything. Most of the houses are selling to LLCs. One of them I saw was out of Georgia. So there's that. And the railroad started this program called, it's called VAPE, I forget. But anyways, what they said is we will pay you the difference in the market value of your house back before February 3rd and what you sell it for now, if you want to move. But there's a couple of issues with that. The first one is, it seems like these LLCs are coming in and buying the houses that are up for sale. So, the market value is good right now, but they're also requiring you to give away some of your legal rights in order to take advantage of this program. The other thing is, we lived in East Palestine because it was cheap. It is this rural community. And when you go around, I mean, let's just take, for example, me. Luckily, I was only renting because I had just moved back home when I found out I was pregnant. But anyways, even with that, okay, it was $650 a month with all utilities included for my place in East Palestine. Where I had to move, it's $950 a month and none of my utilities are included. It's the same thing with these homeowners. Like, okay, first of all, one of my friends has a big farm. So even if she takes, advantage of this vape program, where the hell does she go from the time she sells her house until she finds a new one? Where does she take all of her tractors, her horses, her cows? And where is she going to find the same amount of property? She's not going to find something comparable with the market value that you're getting in East Palestine. Let people get out if they want out. I mean, let us out.
When I hear when you talk, I'm struck by the fact it goes back to what Biden said about it not being an act of God, but this is an act of greed. Listen to what Jamie's talking about, what she's saying here. This was not the life that she wanted. Listen to how she's become consumed by this issue. This is not what she wanted. We're going to have a graphic up here very shortly, meeting in the war room of the White House, for God's sake. These people just wanted to live in a place that was low cost, on low incomes, and enjoy the world as it went by. They had this put upon them through no fault of their own. So why don't we, meaning the United States of America, do something for these folks? Okay, let's go to the next point here in this letter, because it is comprehensive. Conduct comprehensive indoor testing. Now, you talked about this a little bit. This is what you need with the indoor air testing. And it's not only just what the contaminants that come out of the air that might still be trapped in the homes. I'm also thinking about subsurface contamination coming up through the homes is a possibility. But whatever the case might be, there's contaminated air potentially. I think that Scott Smith has found evidence of this trapped inside these homes, Jamie.
Now, come on. It's unlikely there has been vapor intrusion into our homes, is what Deborah Short said, is why they will not test our residential soil. They will not test residential indoor air. The businesses that are right next to the homes, they'll test those. And, here's what really just gets me. The reason why I'm not in my home is because a lead toxicologist for CTEH, which is the railroad's hire contractor, the railroad's contractor, came in my house last year on February 14th and told me that there was a pathway to vapor intrusion in my basement because I had creek water coming down my hall or down my wall in my basement. Another resident, Chrissy Ferguson, US EPA Mark Durno, was just in an article saying that there was vapor intrusion in our home. Something that, and do not ask me what our ancestors were thinking about with this one, but East Palestine is built on top of the creeks. So there's literally tunnels that go under our town, under businesses where these creeks flow. There are homes where it goes under their homes and flows. So, all this contamination in those creeks. The other two things that we have are that back in the day, the sewers ran straight into the creeks. So they had these open pipes. When you're talking about these tunnels, they call them culverts, that they're just now cleaning. The EPA paid $75,000 for a robotic dog that they named Muck to go into these tunnels and test because it wasn't safe. But we're living in these homes. Like, how does it even, make sense? But it's unlikely. When I asked Deborah Shore from the EPA, and I have video of this, I record everything, why they wouldn't do indoor air testing, she gave me two reasons. One, the outdoor air is fine. Look on the EPA's website. It states that indoor air can be 2 to 5 times more contaminated. Yeah. Let's just use common sense. In my case, had that water that was contaminated puddled, they said it would have off-gassed. So do you think that the air in my house would have been different than the air outside? And like I said, common sense, air outside is circulating. It's not trapped. The second reason she said is there's VOCs in everybody's homes. Well, you can test and find out the VOCs. I did find that out, that are from the derailment versus ones in your home. But what I told her is, how about I don't care where the VOCs come from? People weren't sick in their homes before. People are now sick in their homes. And she tells me if they don't come from the derailment, I need to contact my local human health agency. These are the answers that we get from the US EPA.
Well, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, as they say, or the brightest bulb in the box. I got some viewers that are. We saw that earlier. Mary Knox was talking about her science background, which her analysis is very valuable. Also, Suzanne Murphy, the admin of the Truth Bomb Activists. This is what she says, and I think this may be getting into some of her knowledge from the corporate world. She says, so they are paying the market value difference so they can secure a waiver of liability and likely hold them harmless for any future losses. That wouldn't even have occurred to me, Jamie. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You have to sign away some of your legal rights.
Yeah.
You
So,
know,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, go ahead and sign this, and you can get out, but you're not going to be compensated for anything because you got out
So is that market value pre-disaster or post-disaster?
pre-disaster.
Okay. All right. Let me see what this next slide says here, because this is this point-by-point breakdown of what they're wanting. Conduct long-term, robust assessments for hazardous chemicals that may have contaminated the drinking water. And this is like the, what do you call it, 600-pound gorilla or whatever. It's the drinking water, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, one of the concerns is that this just didn't just happen in East Palestine. They say crap runs downhill. Well, it does
Yeah.
literally. Those streams ran downhill into a neighboring community called Negley, Ohio. It's a small unincorporated area, and most of the people in that town depend on wells. When the EPA talks about this, they'll say like it hasn't gotten to the wells yet. They don't know when that stuff's going to hit the wells. Some of these wells were hand dug by the people that live there. These are not like all sophisticated well systems. Uh, and now, gosh, there's so much, George. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
So, other states would not take the contaminated water from East Palestine. So, the EPA in early March, had to put out this thing and basically say, take it or we're pulling your permit to take hazardous waste. So, I think it was Baltimore who said, okay, then we'll take it, we'll treat it, but we're not going to release it back into our waterways the way we normally would. We're going
Good.
to send it back to Ohio. So the solution was, let's build a temporary wastewater treatment plant in East Palestine. So that wasn't bad enough. Now our city council and our whatever in the hell water director, whatever he is, decide that, okay, I know how we can make a little bit more money. How about once they treat this wastewater at the treatment plant, we take it to our own facility and then we release it back into these creeks that are still contaminated.
And yeah, and create sheen on top of sheen. Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, it's common sense. If you already have a stream that's contaminated, even if there's the slightest amount of contamination, and the first thing I would have done is called Baltimore and seen why they didn't take it. If
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
didn't take it and they don't have the capacity to take it, why the heck do you think East Palestine has the capacity and the technology to take that water?
Right. All right, so let's roll through this.
Sorry.
Significantly expand sampling for dioxins and furans. I don't even know what those are in residential soil, indoor dust, fish. Now, I know you're a fisherwoman. I mean, that's a big thing with you, farm animals, wildlife, and other relevant environmental media in East Palestine and nearby communities that may have been impacted. I would have thought that this was part of the plan. Is this what Biden's talking about, or this is not part of the plan?
No, not that. I mean, I don't know because I haven't seen all the funding. It seems like a lot of the funding is going towards human health and studying us, but they're not putting it towards, are we still sitting in this contamination? Again, EPA says it's unlikely that your wildlife has been affected. We're a big country community. We fish, we hunt, we grow our own crops. A day before that, what they didn't know is that Dr. Chai was in the creeks and there was a dead frog. He has it on video and he pokes this dead, bloated frog with a shovel and it explodes with chemicals. They say it's unlikely they've been affected because they haven't tested them. When my brother flat out asked Mark Durno if it was safe to eat a deer during bow season, he said, well, I probably wouldn't eat the liver.
Oh,
Probably wouldn't
God.
eat the liver. Like, come on. It's not probably, it's not unlikely. These are our kids' lives. Do you want to depend on, okay, George, tuck your grandkids in? It's unlikely they're going to die in this home. Do you want it
And we're,
tested or are you feeling okay with it's unlikely?
that maybe this is the changing face of America, and maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. But we were so propagandized. We continue to be. But Hollywood and television made us believe that these elected officials and even law enforcement and doctors, even, that they were all knowing and all wise and that type of thing. But when you have an incident like this, first and foremost, close and personal, you realize, like Jamie does, how dumb some of these people are in some of the things that they do, just violating common sense. Reminds me of that line out of the Bob Dylan song. I mean, you don't trust your officials, don't trust your politicians, folks. I mean, they're not all knowing, they're not all wise. I mean, they're moving around a dead frog with a spade. In addition, we were pleased to see that EPA recently announced that it was beginning a process under the Toxic Substance Control Act to evaluate this vinyl chloride stuff. Such a process should end with a ban on vinyl chloride. Now, some people would look at that, Jamie, and say, oh my God, look at all the positive and beneficial things that come from vinyl chloride. What a wonderful chemical this is that we can use on so many things in our economy. Well, the truth of the matter is that if something is banned for its toxicity like this, they'll find an alternative, hopefully something less toxic. But we don't have to have vinyl chloride to have a successful and thriving economy and country, Jamie.
My stepdad is a union mason by trade. But of course, like most people in the industry, he's kind of a jack of all trades. You know, they usually start out as laborers and then find out what they want to do. And even when he talks about, he's 60 years old. Sorry, Darren. Um, from the time that he's been in the industry, to see the different types of materials that they've went to, yeah, these are luxuries. You know, we get a lot of luxury items from these chemicals. But on the other hand, let's look at what you're weighing here. You're weighing people's lives against convenience and, you know, the need of all these. I don't know, like half the stuff that we have today, we don't really need.
Right.
And I don't think when we look at things like the packaging, that I know vinyl chloride's used for a lot of packaging and stuff like that. Like there are other ways that we can do this that wouldn't be putting children's lives at risk. You know, and I get it. It's not vinyl chloride's fault that it's not being properly handled. But at some point, when do we take accountability as humans? I heard this really good talk in DC about nature's rights. It's a new area law. And it kind of made me feel guilty because I'm like, look, we're fighting for our right to use Mother Nature, to, you know, to breathe the air, to be able to use the soil to grow our food. But who fights for Mother Nature? When do we start looking out for her rights? And that's who truly suffers from all these chemicals being used. And once Mother Nature's gone, we're all going to be gone. So, you know, I know that country folks, kind of like the indigenous people, we treat our land differently. We have a different respect for our land because the land gives us the food that we eat. So, yeah, that's how I feel.
Well,
on that last one is that's added in there because it needs done too.
And we're out of time here. We're coming, and people have been so great
Sorry.
to weigh in with all these. No, you don't need to be sorry about anything. My God, again, to put myself in your place. I mean, I'm just sitting here doing a podcast today, but what if my world was turned upside down like this? You think I wouldn't be wanting to talk a little bit? You think I wouldn't be doing what Jamie is doing? So let's talk about this, Jamie. This is something that you're doing. What are we looking at here?
So again, Unity Council has turned into such a huge group beyond impacted residents. We actually had a big national nonprofit, Break Free from Plastic, that sent us to Climate Week in New York City, where I met the amazing Reverend Woodbury. He's with the New Alpha CDC. Most of the people in this picture are preachers and pastors from North and South Carolina that believe in environmental justice. And it was a very unannounced trip because, you know, from meeting the Reverend in New York, he had called me to catch up. And he's like, hey, why don't you be my guest at this CEQ meeting? Never been in environmental stuff before. So I'm like, what's CEQ? They're the direct advisors to Biden on the environment. So it was this huge opportunity that I had to go speak at the White House, the people that actually had Biden's ear. I also, I think it was only one. Gosh, so many people have helped us do a petition to get President Biden to sign this declaration disaster. I also delivered that there, 25,000 signatures on it. You know, we had Toxic Free Future, who just did a whole report that I'll have to send you on vinyl chloride and where it travels through the United States, so that people kind of get the full picture that this is everywhere. It can happen to everyone. You know, so this is part of my bigger Unity Councils. my new brothers and sisters from down south that got this amazing opportunity for us.
I see a lot of people taking notes. They look like they're paying strict attention in this. Do you have hopes for this, for a positive outcome? You mentioned that they wanted to get this information in front of Biden, and I'm thinking this is before he came to East Palestine. Is this going to have a positive outcome, do you think?
The day after this meeting is when President Biden announced that he was coming to East Palestine. I'm not taking full responsibility for that. There was a whole fiasco with a letter that was sent to him, but I believe he was originally going to bring the people up to the White House. So I like to think that I had something to do with this. I know that I speak from my heart, and I feel like God gives me the right words, so I never prepare a speech before I go in. And when
Good for
I
you.
had these men and women in this room that are pastors, that are used to public speaking, have been in environmental justice, and they're like, dang, I wish I could speak with the passion, that you spoke with. Like, that was amazing. One woman from the CEQ had tears in her eyes because it's the truth. Like I said, speak it like it is. Our kids have blood coming out of their noses,
My
out of
God.
their ears. They're coughing up blood. So I am hopeful, just in the connections that I made with the people in this room, that they're going to help me continue the fight too.
Yeah, here. Certainly hope so. And I don't know if you're seeing these comments that I'm putting up on screen here, but a lot of folks are saying, Desert Man is here. Thank you, Jamie,
That's what I have to
for your
do.
persistent courage. You're not alone. I mean, it's it's above and beyond what you're doing. But again, it came to your doorstep. It was not something that it was not your fault whatsoever. And again, who would want this for their world? This is not what Jamie wanted. We're going to revisit. We'll come back to her. We'll find out whether or not there's anything that Biden is actually going to do that's going to come from this, hopefully, that we're not seeing in this initial reporting, because most of the initial reporting was not that good, although Biden did say, as you saw in that earlier graphic, that we're not talking about an act of God here, folks. We're talking about an act of greed. And if you understand that, then why don't we do something more than what we're doing? Jamie, any closing thoughts here? Anything you want to leave us with before we go away? Maybe tout your website, your Facebook page, something like that. We'll let you have the last word.
Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment. I didn't think about how long that was before I announced it.
Yeah.
Our email is unitycouncil2023@gmail.com. You can find us on social media platforms. And I also want to let you know that on February 20th of this year, next week, we're having our inaugural meeting of the Chemically Impacted Communities Coalition, because there are fighters like me in every community that step up and take the lead. Shame on me for never hearing him, Times Beach, Missouri, or Love Canal, or any of the places that have dealt with this same thing to different levels. We're going to have, I got representation from Love Canal, Times Beach, the BP oil spill. Now it's time to bring all these communities together for the communities. A lot of these big nonprofits focus on the environment, but who focuses on the community? When this happens, we didn't know where to go. We didn't know how to organize. We didn't know where our resources were. So now we need to come together, because it's going to take more than just me and more than just East Palestine to fight this greed that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and don't think that it can't come to a doorstep near you, because it can. Anybody within sound of my voice is within proximity of a rail line, and toxic chemicals are rolling down the rail towards a derailment, and who knows when and where that could happen. And I hope it ain't you, and I wish that it wasn't Jamie, but it has been that way.
But if it
And
was you, get a hold of me and you can join our new council coalition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, let me see here if I can go ahead and get these banners off of the screen here, because I want to. There we go. We'll hide that one and wish Jamie well, and we'll circle back. We will. I said I wouldn't forget. I don't know whether or not Biden did. I don't know why it took him a year to get there. That would have been maybe my first question that I would have asked him, Jamie, is what the hell, dude? What have you been doing? Where you been? So at least he got there and did
Me
say
too.
some
That's why I
positive thing.
wasn't in the room.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're talking about First Amendment rights here, and that's what we're going to be talking about Wednesday with Julian Assange, because, folks, if you don't have the ability to hear what Jamie Ray has to say, you wouldn't know these things. We have to have the ability to publish, to print, to voice our opinions and our thoughts. and prayers or whatever you might have from the First Amendment. And we're going to be talking about that Wednesday on Podcast by George. Jamie, we'll talk again soon. All the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, folks. And I hope that you enjoyed seeing Jamie. And again, thanks everybody for the comments and questions. They were great on the show. And if you like seeing Podcast by George and guests like Jamie Ray Wallace, please, if you're watching on Facebook right now, follow us, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment there. That helps beat the algorithm, of course. And on YouTube, you need to subscribe if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell so that you're notified of future shows, and give us a thumbs up there as well. But folks, that is going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.